First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for coming tonight and joining us in honoring two very, very distinguished scholars. It's been a difficult 2 weeks for all of us, particularly those that were close to Milton and to Dr. Dorset Graves. I'd personally like to thank Dr. Matt Evertson for helping me with this and actually proposing the idea. We had less than a week to put this together, so it's been kind of a wing and type thing. But I thought it was only fitting because the two individuals that really were key players in the Graves Lecture Series was Dr. Dorset Graves and Milton Wolfe. I would also like to extend my condolences to the Graves family. It was a loss. Dorset meant a lot to all of us, the library, and the community in general. He was one of the kindest men I knew. My heart goes out to him. I'd also like to extend my condolences. I think I talk loud enough.
For posterity.
Okay. I'd also like to thank Justin Hay and his group for filming this. And last, I'd like to send my condolences to the Milton Wolfe family. His sister, Rosemary Fox, Rosemary Fox, we got Fox and Wolfe. You'd stand up. She came from Pittsburgh. She flew in last night. His sister-in-law, Joe. And last, a very, very important person to Milton was his best friend for over 20 years. Carl Elges was with Milton through his illness, and I cannot thank him enough for what he's gone through. I know it was a terrible blow and a loss to you, Carl, but he loved you so much. Carl Elges. Something Milton really enjoyed and he appreciated in this area was the hiking abilities. The pictures that are displayed on these easels in this room are all pictures that he took during his hiking trips, and all of them are in this area. Fort Robinson, Crawford, and Chadron. He was quite proud of those. I remember him showing those to me and telling me where they were. And I've lived here most of my life and had absolutely no clue what he was talking about. This evening, what we're going to do is deviating from a normal Graves Lecture Series. I'm going to talk a little bit about Milton, and then Matt Evertson is going to talk about Dorset Graves and a bit about Milton. After that, I'm going to open it up to you in the audience. So please come up and share any experiences or stories that you might have had with either Milton or Dorset. For over a decade, Room 108 was occupied by Dr. Dorset Graves as his personal library and office. During the fall of 2006, in honor of Dorset Graves, Milton Wolfe began a series of lectures called the Dorset Graves Lecture Series, to be given several times a year in the library of Room 108. When Milton approached Dorset and told him about this, Dorset was flattered. It meant so much to him. And he continued to be one of our religious attendees. He was even one of the featured speakers, I think, more than once. This is only one of the many endeavors that Milton had accomplished during his employment at Chadron State College. I've had the privilege to work for and with Milton Wolfe since he came to Chadron State College. And I can say with all honesty that it's been nothing but a total delight. Since he became the library director, the changes that have occurred in our library have been absolutely incredible. It made coming to work so exciting. I looked forward to every day. I knew it was going to be an adventure, and I never knew what to expect. Milton Wolfe began employment at Chadron State College as the director of the library in August of 2005. Prior to coming to campus, he prepared an implementation plan that was shared with the members of the library, including some of the Chadron State College administration. In this plan, a significant aspect that Milton observed was the library was not meeting the needs of the users. It was not an inviting destination. It was not the heart of the college, and that it was necessary to rededicate the library and the library staff to serving the information needs of the faculty, the students, and the curricula. So, the fun began. The lower level was completely transformed. Milton and I took inventory on the rooms that were in the lower level. Most of them were full of outdated furniture, technological devices, basically just junk. This was all sent to surplus, maybe even to the dump, I'm not sure. And as a result of this, a mediated classroom was implemented, a computer lab was added, 2 classrooms were added, a coffee shop was added, room 108 was painted, redecorated, and dedicated to Dr. Dorset Graves. These changes alone all took place in the first year that Milton Wolfe was here. After Milton's death, Dr. Charles Smear asked me to put together a list of Milton's accomplishments and contributions to the library. My first thought was, where do I begin? Because there's been so much. Since time is limited tonight, I'm only going to highlight a few. But if anybody is interested in talking to me about what Milton has done to transform the library into the 21st century, I'd be more than happy to sit down over a cup of coffee and talk to you about it. We worked closely, very closely together, not always agreeably. We had some difficult times, you might want to say. His ideas were the idea. Mine were usually next until they became his ideas. That happened on several occasions, most recently in the renovations. I mentioned moving the law library into room 107, and I don't really think that works, Sean. I go, but really? I said, it's right by the mediated classroom. The sat leeches in there a lot. She could bring her group down, go into the classroom. A couple days later, he came up and he said, you know, Sean, I was thinking, what if we were to move the law collection down into room 106? I go, good idea. During the summer of 2011, Dr. Lois Feith and Milton Wolfe began the planning process for the library renovations, which are currently taking place. The intention of the renovations was to create an information commons in which information literacy and the research education are the curriculum, a petri dish for evolving technologies and teaching and learning methodologies, and most importantly, something Milton has dreamt of having, an intellectual living room of a campus that is powered by the students, the faculty, information technologists, and the librarians all brewed together. And that's what we're doing right now. Included in these renovations is an IT help desk, a teaching and learning center, the ITC staff, scattered computer stations throughout the first floor, a new reference and circulation desk, compact shelving, a student lounge, group study rooms, relocation of the curriculum and young adult library, and the key element to an information commons, a fully equipped coffee shop. These renovations are in the works, and like I said, I'd like to invite anybody to come over to the library. I always get excited just walking around and telling them and showing them the changes that are going to take place. It's exciting, and it's certainly going to be a positive addition to the library. All thanks to Milton's vision and his innovative thinking. Early in March 2011, Milton was diagnosed with prostate cancer. The cancer had progressed enough that total prostate removal was recommended. After this devastating news, he was diagnosed with a heart virus, something that needed to be treated with medication and taken care of prior to his surgery. Consequently, he was placed on heavy-duty heart medications, and in addition to this, he was having difficulty sleeping. So he was prescribed some sleep medication. The sleep medication allowed him maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep, but once he was awake, and he couldn't go back to sleep. His surgery took place on July 10th, in Omaha. It was a successful surgery. Carl called me and was flying high. Consequently, so was I. However, it wasn't all that successful. Attached to the prostate was a piece of pus. Milton told me this when he came back, and he said the surgeon had never seen anything like that. And right away, a red flag went up in my head, but I didn't want to say anything to Milton, because positive attitudes are very important. In cancer patients, I lost a brother to cancer. It turns out this little piece of pus was a cancerous tumor, and Milton was required to undergo 6 weeks of intense radiation. When he told me this, I reassured him that radiation was a piece of cake. My dad had undergone radiation for his prostate cancer. He didn't have side effects, and this was just a temporary setback. He was going to get well. He needed to get well because I needed him. Because the treatments were essentially a 2-hour one-way trip if he was to go to Scottsbluff or Rapid City, he and Carl decided that they would schedule them in Reno, Nevada, where Carl has a place. This was going to begin in mid-October, and that's essentially the reason I moved all of the Gray's lecture series talks up back to back so he could be part of it. The Gray's lecture series meant so much to Milton. He's the one that started it. And he looked forward to every speaker we had, and he was always the one that would dialogue and create conversation with the audience. Between the constant disappointing news that Milton seemed to be receiving over and over and the medications, his drive, his passion, and love for life was slowly diminishing. He told me countless times, he goes, "Sean, I'm trying so hard." And I told him, "I know you are, and I'm so proud of you. You're going to get better, you're going to get better." But he was tired. He was really tired. He was tired of not feeling well, he was tired of not thinking straight, and most of all, he was tired of feeling that he didn't really have a reason or a purpose for life or living. On August 29th at 11 p.m., Carl and Milton were evacuated from their home. And I truly believe this was the final draw. I heard about it the next morning. I come to work with the chickens, I guess. I'm a farm girl. And I was out talking to my next door neighbor, and she said, "Sean, did you know the courses were canceled for Thursday and Friday?" And I said, "Gosh, no. What's going on?" She said, "Because of the smoke, and so for the kids traveling, and etc." And I said, "Oh, okay." And she said, "Also, they've evacuated those south of 385. When I got to work, I called Milton at his home, and I didn't get an answer. So I called Carl, and sure enough, he told me they had been evacuated and they were at the country kitchen eating. I was being quite selfish, I think, at the time, because I had an email I needed to address and answer, and I wanted Milton to talk to me about it. Said they were going to come to work, and I said, "Okay, great, I'll see you in a little bit." He came, and I could tell that Milton was disturbed, incredibly disturbed. I told him about what I was going to do, and he said, "That sounds fine, good." In the meantime, he was scheduled to be at a meeting, which he told me he was going to tell them he could not be there because of the evacuation. He came back, and we visited for a bit, and they left because Carl was incredibly tired. He hadn't gotten any sleep. Carl told me when they looked out the window, or when they walked out of Country Kitchen and looked south for 85, they just knew their home was destroyed. I miss Milton Wolf. I miss his brilliant mind, his visions, his love and passion for libraries and life that he's passed on to me. I personally could not even begin to express my gratitude to him for what he's done for my personal and professional growth. He taught me so much about the many facets of libraries. Milton was my mentor, my boss, my professional colleague, my consultant, and most importantly, a dear, dear friend. I'll be forever grateful to him for what he taught me. The time we spent together, bouncing around ideas, mine were usually mixed until they became his, discussing the information literacy course, personnel issues, and for the friendship we shared. I was lucky to know him and have him for a friend. Milton has left a legacy, one that I'm proud to say I was part of. A vision of what a library could and should be. And I will do my best to carry forward with his wishes. The information commons will happen, the coffee shop will come, and we will become an academic library of his and my dreams. One of my favorite movies, not favorite, but one that comes to my mind was Brian's Song. I don't know if any of you have seen it. I kind of have weird taste in movies, kind of cheesy chick flicks, but it's a story about two football players who became very good friends. Brian Piccolo and Gail Sayers. Towards the end of the movie, Gail Sayers receives the Professional Football Award. And when it's presented to him, his words were something like this: "I'm flattered to receive the George S. Halas Award. But Brian Piccolo is the person that should be receiving this award. He has a rare form of courage, which allows him to kid himself and his opponent, cancer. I love Brian Piccolo, and I'd like you to love him too. And tonight, please ask God to love him too." I can honestly say, I loved Milton Wolfe. The friendship we shared, the professional relationship, will always be very, very dear to my heart. I'll never forget him. And if possible, I would like all of you to love him too. I would also ask you to please remember Milton as the person that you knew, not the way he died. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thanks everybody for coming tonight. It's a great testament. I like that word you used, legacy, and I think about tonight as a celebration of these men, and I think some of the things that I'm going to read from some testimonials, you're going to see a lot of people who were impacted who just couldn't seem to leave a campus for some reason. Dorset couldn't seem to stay away, and Milton loved it here, and I think that all these people joining in this atmosphere is a great tribute to that. I am the chair of the Department of English and Humanities on campus, and so it kind of falls to me to honor the legacy of Dorset in regards to what he contributed to our department. And also, I didn't know Dorset real well. I didn't know Milton real well, but I did get the opportunity to work alongside them over the years on campus here, and I always really had great interactions with them. A few words about Milton before I turn to Dorset. I think when he was hired here, I do remember attending the interviews of the people who were being brought to campus, and I was excited when he was hired because he had expressed this love of literature. We would call it genre literature, but science fiction and fantasy. And we immediately thought in our department that that's probably an area that some of us didn't have as much expertise in. And we did send some of our students. I think Nathan is maybe going to say a few words about how Milton impacted his own work in this genre. And so we were really excited about that. And I know in my discussions with them, very passionate discussions about science fiction, if you got them off on that tangent, it would go for a while, and most of it straight over my head. but those were always really wonderful conversations. I was on the Teaching and Learning Center committee for last year, and there was a lot of this planning for the information commons and all that sort of stuff going on. And we'd go over for tours in the library, and that's one of the, I think the slideshow captured it with Milton and the stacks there, really at home in the library. Clearly loved that notion of this place, this testament to learning and to information. And I really got a charge out of his enthusiasm for all the projects that I think are going to be the legacy and sort of stand as testament to that. And then the Gray's lecture series has been just wonderful over the last several years. And you mentioned, Sean, that he always was asking the probing questions. You can see most of the lectures on YouTube and the CSE channel, and I think they're taping this one tonight. And I went back to look at mine. I presented last year in November on a book project I'm working on. And at the end, it was on Theodore Roosevelt and Stephen Crane. And at the end, I was listening. Milton asked if there were questions, and you know, everybody's shy, and so he volunteered. I'm not quite sure how it connected, but it had something to do with the Occupy movement and Mitt Romney and Michael Moore, and I was okay, but it was a very probing, interesting question, and that did set the discussion forward, so I always appreciated that, and I noticed that in many of the lecture series that he was sort of a generating force of ideas there, and sometimes controversy. And then, of course, we had a writing workshop that we planned through the department and in affiliation with the Sandoz Society called the Storycatcher Summer Writing Workshop. And we knew that Milton would be a natural for leading one of the workshop sessions on fantasy or science fiction, because I don't know if you've noticed, there's a lot of that around these days in the literary world, of vampires and such, and we knew that would be a big draw. And he was very enthusiastic about doing it, and so around the first of the spring semester, we started putting together publicity materials, and I asked Milton, please send me a description of what your workshop would be like. And it was a rather lengthy and very enthusiastic description, but you know, it had to fit on a advertising card. So we edited it down, and this is what we finally came up with. The name of his workshop was Fiction Writing, Science Fiction, and Fantasy. Workshop focus. Come join me for a writing workshop that will open wide your eyes of inquiry, yet keep you focused on the final goal of any writer, to be published. Einstein was not kidding when he said that, quote, imagination is more important than knowledge, exclamation point. On the way to the known, you sometimes must pass through the unknown. If you want to tell stories, don't limit yourself. Fiction doesn't. And science fiction and fantasy, often joined at the hip, provide an elastic incubator for the imagination. Bring your mind to the workshop on writing science fiction and fantasy, and let's tease out your thoughts. Let's put them on paper. Let's make them real, if you know what I mean. I love that description. I think he had some stuff about meeting in the cantina in Star Wars or something like that, but we had to it was interesting. And as Sean said, he started to manifest some of these health problems right around the time we were getting to put the workshop on. I mean, the workshop was in late May, and he kept saying, are you sure you want, and thumbs up, and I plan on being there. And it really was heartbreaking when you knew that somebody had to say to him, look, it's probably not a good idea, you don't have the energy to do this, let's get you well so you can be back and do it next year. And I know that was a disappointment. And we did have a lot of students who were disappointed because they had signed up for that workshop, and it was a shame that he wasn't able to be able to contribute. But I think, like we said, that the legacy he leaves behind through these sort of lecture series and this level of learning, hopefully, you know, is what we'll think about when we think of Milton, and I certainly think of him in very fond ways in that regards. I thought maybe transitioning to a few words about Dorset, that in the spirit of Dorset, we should have a reading assignment. And you all brought your Moby Dick, I'm assuming. So I ran into, the slideshow's not going right now, but you'll notice that there are a couple of images of Dorset, I believe, with Mike Cartwright Bob McEwen, who currently teach, well, Mike doesn't teach in our department anymore, but they were all students students of Dorset, and then they went on to teach here. And I ran into Mike the other day at the coffee house, and I asked him, I said, is there something I could read that is kind of in the spirit of Dorset? And he said that he knew that Dorset had done work on Melville. Might have been his dissertation, is that correct? Does anybody know? Okay, doesn't matter. But Mike remembers very vividly being assigned Moby Dick, and I think it might have been in freshman comp, which is a pretty ambitious, thing. But, Moby Dick is not necessarily, a joke fest. It's a pretty dark novel, and it's a very lengthy novel, of course. But Mike said that he remembered that Dorset particularly liked this chapter called The Monkey Rope. And if you know the story of Moby Dick, it's about people out doing whale hunting. And in this scene, they finally have captured a whale, and it's tied to the side of the Pequod. And we have the narrator, Ishmael, who is, telling us the story, and he is helping the lead harpooner, Queequeg. He's down on the whale, kind of riding it like a treadmill or a log, in the water, as they're cutting the whale up and harvesting the oil. Now, Queequeg, he's the chief harpooner on the Pequod, and he's described throughout the narrative as a massive South Pacific islander, a real huge guy. He's pagan, he's cannibal, he's covered over with tribal tattoos. He's everything that is the opposite of Ishmael, who has a biblical name, comes from New England, And so in this scene, Ishmael is tied to Queequeg, and I think this gets at what Mike was saying, why this was a significant passage. It has something to do with humanity. Being the savage's bowsman, that is, the person who pulled the bow oar in his boat, and second from the forward, it was my cheerful duty to attend upon him while taking that hard-scrabble scramble upon the dead whale's back. You have seen Italian organ boys holding a dancing ape by a long cord. Just so, from the ship's steep side, did I hold Queequeg. Down there in the sea, by what is technically called in the fishery a monkey rope, attached to a strong strip of canvas belted around his waist. It was a humorously perilous business for both of us, for before we proceed further, it must be said that the monkey rope was fast at both ends, fast to Queequeg's broad canvas belt and fast to my narrow leather one. So that for better or worse, we two, for the time, were wedded. And should poor Queequeg sink to the rise no more than both usage and honor demanded, that instead of cutting the cord, it should drag me down in his wake. So then, an elongated Siamese ligature united us. You familiar with these words? I'm not. Favorite novel? Queequeg was my own inseparable twin brother. Nor could I any way get rid of the dangerous liabilities which the hempen bond entailed. So strongly and metaphysically did I conceive of my situation then, that while earnestly watching his motions, I seemed distinctly to perceive that my own individuality was now merged in a joint stock company of the two, that my free will had received a mortal wound, and that another's mistaken misfortune might plunge innocent me into unmerited disaster and death. Therefore, I saw that here was some sort of interregnum in Providence, for its even-handed equity never could be sanctioned so gross as an injustice. And yet still further pondering, this all while holding the cannibal at the end of the rope, while I jerked him now and then from between the whale and the ship, which would threaten to jam him, still further pondering, I say, I saw that this situation of mine was the precise situation of every mortal that breathes, every mortal that breathes. Only in most cases he, one way or the other, has this Siamese connection with a plurality of other mortals. We'll discuss what the meaning of that passage is after we have a few words from George Griffith from our department, who I think knew Dorset probably longer than anyone else in our department, probably in this room in a lot of ways. George?
Well, I'm really very honored to have the opportunity here to say a few words about Dorset. I worked with him for many, many years. I think we should take the sad and odd coincidence of Milton and Dorset's passing so close to one another and use that as an opportunity to recognize how fitting it is, really, that we honor the two of them together here tonight. Milton initiated the Dorset Grades lecture series, which he named the Dorset Graves lecture series. The two of them seem tied at the hip as far as that's concerned. Milton spent his life presiding over collections of books in a library. Dorset amassed his own collection of books and had his own library. And before his death, of course, Dorset passed on to the library a couple of thousands of those books. It is, for Dorset, really, if you think about his place here at the college, a legacy of books and learning. And you can measure it in many ways besides those several thousand books he left to the library. If you wander up to the second floor, for example, of the library and browse among the 800s, you'll find many, many books that wouldn't be there had Dorset not ordered them. I used to, well, I always spent a lot of time in the 800s in the library, and when I first got here, I could almost chart Dorset's passions and the way they passed from one writer to another. So we would have, for example, we still have in that library an enormous collection of scholarship about William Blake, about James Joyce. I thought that's extraordinary that we have all of these books in a little state college library here. But that's because Dorset was at one time going through a Blake passion and at another time going through a James Joyce passion. So you can measure Dorset's legacy not just in those books in the library, but in people as well. Dorset hired me in 1975. And among existing faculty in the English department and recently retired faculty in the English department, there are 3 of us whom Dorset hired. I always felt immensely grateful to him for having hired me, and I always hoped that he thought that he had made the right judgments in hiring those 3 people. I think he probably did think that, and I hope we merited his regard. The people whom you can measure Dorset's legacy in books and learning in also you can see in a whole generation of students who went on to become teachers of English. And we're talking now in my time here all the way back to 1975 and Dorset's time back to 1958. So you can see Dorset's legacy in the kinds of remarks that he just recently here, for example, I came upon from students. I have a number of former students, some of whom are old enough to have had Dorset before he retired in 1990. I have a number of these students as Facebook friends. So when the notice of Dorset's death came out, many of them commented right away. They were all moved, they were all saddened, they all remarked about what a difference he had made in their life and how he had made their professional lives often possible. I was pleased to see Matt read Moby Dick. I'm remembering one student in particular who said something like this: "Oh, what memories. We read Moby Dick one semester, a whole semester." That's the difference that he made in a lot of people's lives. In teaching, it's interesting. We all watch each other, and I watched him for many years. He was the only English teacher I ever knew who had his own personal library cart. The rest of us, this is the sort of cart that's used in the circulation department to return books to shelves. The rest of us would walk across the hall with a book, as Matt came up here with one book. We'd walk across the hall with a book and a piece of chalk. Dorset wheeled a cart across the hall, loaded with Lord knows how many books, and do some massive show and tell. After his retirement and after the remodeling of the old admin building, I think the library finally got its cart back. I think for many years they were just afraid even to ask for it. He used it well. So it was a pleasure for me, really, to work with him for many years and to admire what he did with kids and what he did with books. His is a legacy of books and of people as well. I'd like to read now a short piece that Walt Schull has written and that I've been asked to read. Walt writes, "I've always had a sense or felt a sense of vibrancy in the presence of someone of such intellectuality and thoughtfulness. And that was certainly the case with Dorset. I felt privileged to have spent 20+ years under his guidance in the Language and Literature Department at CSC. He was a devotee of the humanities, and he was ever an encouragement for the liberal arts concept of preparing the minds of students for a richer walk of life once they leave the short college stage. It's impossible to put in words the depth and breadth of him. He spent a lifetime poring over the best of humanities thinking through an untold number of books. He unselfishly and generously shared his encyclopedic knowledge with students to the end of his life. Although his life has come to a close, for those of us who knew him, the book he left in our minds will never close as long as we live. Thank you.
I remember that card because I shared an office with Dorset when I was first teaching here. And he was very possessive of the card, that's true. I mean, we laugh about it, but don't move the card. So I have some testimonials here, and then we're going to open it up. Is that right, Sean, for people who want to say a few words? The word did get out on Facebook, and we had some notices go out on the CSC website, so people sent me some things. So I'll just read through some of these. I'll try to do them justice. And I think all these people were very interested in being able to watch the program eventually when it's put online. So the first note is just a kind of a brief note from Dr. Sam Rankin, who was our 8th president at CSC. And he writes, upon arrival at CSC in 1986, I was a pipe smoker. On the second floor of admin one day, shortly after arrival, I followed the scent fragrance of what seemed to me a very unique blend of pipe tobacco. It led me, of course, to the chair of the Language and Literature Department's office. Dorset offered a bowl of tobacco, and in short, I learned what an asset the college had in this teacher, scholar, and gentleman. It's kind of an interesting image, isn't it? Things have changed a little bit since 1986. The next piece I had sent to me was from Cassie Wilson, from Cassandra Wilson, and she is the granddaughter of Dorset and daughter of Dorset's son, Chris. And correct me if I get any of this wrong, I'm just going by her email. She and her brother and sister moved to Pocomoke, Maryland in 2000 when Cassie was 15 to live with their father. She graduated from Salisbury University with a bachelor's in elementary education and has been teaching 5th grade in Cambridge, Maryland for the past 4 years. She saw the CSC Facebook page an announcement that we would be celebrating the life of her grandfather at this first lecture series of the year, and she wrote to me, quote, I want to thank you for honoring my grandpa. He was such a loving father and grandfather, and it is wonderful to see how he impacted the college and community. I wish so much that I could attend this presentation. So I invited her to write back with some thoughts about her grandfather, and she did. And she has a very nice piece that she wrote, and she shared some of the photos that we saw on the slideshow of her with her grandfather. I don't know what Dorset's holding in his hands when he's, is that a present or something? Some videos, some books, I don't know, but that's a very interesting picture that she sent. My Personal Memories of Dorset Graves by Cassandra Graves Wilson. His students referred to him as Dr. Graves, but my siblings and I called this man Grandpa. In his classes, he passionately taught literature, philosophy, and humanities. He taught his family how to live, how to love, and the simple values of life. My sister, brother, and I lived in Rapid City, and we spent numerous weekends traveling to Chadron to visit Granny and Grandpa. They always gave us the love and structure we needed to become successful adults in life. Grandpa introduced us to a love of movies, music, and literature. He would pick us up at Maverick Junction, and we would listen to Cabaret, Fiddler on the Roof, and other show tunes in the car. Sometimes he played classical music, such as Mozart, as my sister, brother, and I pretended to play the piano in the back seat. He and Granny helped pay for ballet and various music lessons. In the evenings, we all sat together in the family den and watched classic movies starring Judy Garland, Fred Astaire, or Ginger Rogers. Sometimes Grandpa would play the piano or sing Hello Dolly to my sister and me, substituting the words with, how nice it is to see you back in Chadron where you belong. I think I got that tune right. He took us to plays at Chadron State College and once to Les Miserables in Rapid City Civic Center. Granny and Grandpa both encouraged us to read and set an example by doing it themselves. Grandpa was often found in his study surrounded by stacks of books, while Granny frequently read the newspaper during the day. Sometimes Grandpa quoted verses by Emily Dickinson, Robert Frost, or Shakespeare. Together, Granny and Grandpa were the smartest people I have ever met. During the holidays, we never wanted to play trivia on a team against them because they seemed to know everything. Their passion for learning and teaching was passed down to their children and grandchildren. I have reflected on my grandfather's generosity frequently this week. I thought about the vacations to Colorado he and Granny took us on each summer. I remember trips to the post office and the times we didn't go, but he brought home coloring books and stickers for us. In the mornings we woke up and he would prepare breakfast, usually Crispix with bananas or coffee cake. Some mornings he had vocabulary words written on index cards to teach us. Other mornings we simply talked about school, home, or life. Most of my happiest childhood moments were spent in Chadron at Granny and Grandpa's house. Grandpa always communicated with us how much he loved us and how we needed to respect others and respect ourselves. These values have molded me into the person I am today and into the teacher I am today. I wish all of my students had a man in their lives like my grandpa. I feel so honored not only to have met him, but to be a part of his family and to have him touch my life in the way he did. Isn't that nice? Very well written, I thought. I'm scrolling through the pictures she sent. Some good pictures. And then I have 3 people who sent me testimonials. Now, these are students. And it's kind of interesting, they lay out sort of from the start of Dorset's career teaching here and the impact he had to the very sort of end when he was sort of teaching as an adjunct for us. The first one is sent to me from Karen Pisaka Miller, who encountered Professor Graves about 6 years after he first started teaching at Chadron State. She writes, "When I learned from the Chadron record that you were asking for reminiscences of Dr. Graves, I had to write and add mine. In the autumn of 1964, I was an 18-year-old incoming freshman when Dr. Graves appeared in our humanities classroom to give a short talk on the importance of the course we were taking. Tall, handsome, imposing, he commanded our attention with consummate stage presence. I do not remember all that he said so long ago, but he finished his summation with the Macbeth soliloquy. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound of fury, signifying nothing." Is that the way you should start? Anyway. On the last 2 words, his voice trailed off into a bitter whisper. I can see that. That's a good image. Nothing in our high school English classes had exposed us to Shakespeare like this. We sat there electrified. I remember that a few boys, obviously boobs, in the back snickered after a few seconds, but I realized years later that he had probably reached them also. Although I later majored in other fields, I took 3 courses from Dr. Graves, and what I know of Shakespeare, poetry, and film, I learned mostly from him. I collected a BA, an MA, and an EDS over the years, and I owe a great deal to many people in whose classroom I sat, but Dr. Graves remains the most unforgettable. From him I learned to love Shakespeare. I already loved the other 2. Not a bad legacy. And I wrote her back, I wrote Karen back to find out a little bit more because she was, piquing my interest with these other degrees she spoke of. I don't know any other degree other than English, but I followed up with Karen and asked her for more information, and she wrote back some wonderful details about her experiences. So she went on to get her BA in art from Oklahoma State University, so she didn't finish at Chadron. She writes, quote, "I had no intentions of teaching, but found life as a commercial artist a total bore within a year. I always had an interest in history and decided to go on to graduate school. I collected the extra undergrad courses needed and was awarded an MA in 1973. That year I married a historian from the University of Nebraska, and I began working as an adjunct at Tarrant County Community College in Fort Worth. Following my spouse's career, I taught at Brevard Community College in Cocoa, Florida as an assistant professor in the history department. I enrolled in college a 3rd time for an education specialist degree in U.S. history after we moved to Georgia. I also returned to CSE in the summer of 1982 to take a course in advanced grammar and enjoyed it immensely. I don't know who taught that. And Dr. Graves' course, titled Fiction into Film, I put all English courses to good use. I took the National Teacher's Exam in that discipline and scored high enough to receive a teacher certification, which I used in teaching some high school English. As you can see by now, and she was very nervous about spilling too many beans here, but as you can see by now, I am the role model of the perennial student. Those are her words. I like that. Indeed, I love being on a college campus in a classroom, whether a student or an instructor. Dr. Graves and a few others like him did more than just light a little candle. In this student's case, they appear to have started something of a forest fire. I didn't want to tell her that maybe isn't the best thing to say. So I think that theme comes up again and again in these testimonials. And she was rather coy about this. At the end, she said, Chadron State College is still the school dearest to my heart. One more fact I downplay and never mention, although of which I am secretly quite proud. I represented CSC in Chadron in the Miss Nebraska contest in 1966. Two more. The next testimonial comes from Daniel Schweitzer, who really, if he watches this, he's going to get a big head. He was easily one of the most accomplished majors in our program in recent memory, and he sent me this wonderful testimonial that you'll hear in a second, but the same thing, I know not everybody maybe knows his fame, and so I asked for a few words about his background, and I was trying to I'll just read them. I was at CSC from 2004 to 2008. I was originally planning on doing some sort of major leading to human resources, business, with a minor in psychology was my thought, and then had Drs. Graves, Dr. McEwen, and Dr. Shepard in one semester, by the end of which I was a double major in history and English, and at the joint insistence of Dr. Graves and especially Dr. McEwen, joined the sadly now defunct honors program. It's quite a turnaround. While at CSC, I was involved with the Campus Historical Forum and Sigma Tau Delta and gained some of the most valuable experience in my fledgling career working at the Mari Sanjo Center. I don't know if it's worth mentioning, I love how he says this, I don't know if it's worth mentioning in something like this, but I was the first student speaker in the Graves lecture series. After that, I went to the University of South Dakota, where I completed my thesis on Annie Proulx's Western Neo-Regionalist Stories under Dr. John Dudley. I'm currently a presidential teaching fellow at Buffalo. And I should explain, by Buffalo, he means State University of New York, SUNY Buffalo. He's in the second year of his PhD, and his academic CV is already quite long. He is presenting at MLA, which is the premier organization in our field, this January on a panel that some of the students have put together there. So this is what he wrote. I've been racking my brain since I heard about Dr. Graves' death. I've been trying to figure out what it is I would want to say. Maybe it is impossible to give a full account of the ways another person has changed you to describe what he or she has done. On the first day of composition, Dr. Graves assigned us an autobiography. On the second day, he told us that despite what we had turned in under that title, an autobiography was not simply the outlining of bare facts about a life, it was a reflection on the event or events that had shaped that life and given it meaning. Choose one significant event, we were told, and look to it for what it meant for us. And so, the event. Dr. Graves corrected my grammar. A lot! In person as well as on paper. I was guilty of repeated offenses against the objective case, especially where prepositions were involved. I used was, not were, when speaking in the subjunctive. I seemed unable to decide whether he and I or him and me were going to do much of anything. And when we got there, we often discovered we changed verb tense. I had real difficulty separating my ethics from my health, as indicated by my inability to decide whether I was doing well or good. Added to this was a tendency to mispronounce words. At least I never used irregardless, a word that, as nearly as I could tell, he loathed above all. Significance. I have had the good fortune to be corrected by many brilliant people. Lest I give the wrong impression, Dr. Graves was the only person I had met who asked me during one of our first conversations outside of class whether I would mind if he were to list errata in our conversation. Errata is E-R-R-A-T-A, and we're reading Ben Franklin in class on Thursday, and he uses that term a lot. It's an old printer's term for fixing, editing a mistake on the manuscript, right? And he meant it. It was not a goal of catching me out, Dan says. Teaching was for him an act of kindness. He would, if I were upset about a class or railing about politics, listen attentively, respond thoughtfully, and only after a pause, sometimes of days, mention that he noticed I had used him and I in conversation. I think his detestation of irregardless, though, is most telling. Dr. Graves told me that it was because never, the reason is because, by the way, Dan says, irregardless is redundant because it is an attempt to demonstrate erudition one does not possess, and in any event, because the word doesn't exist in college English. It was, in other words, an offense against language, a gesture of superciliousness, and factually inaccurate, three things he could not, in my experience, abide. And that, I think, do you see the influence of the style here, by the way? And that, I think, is what it meant to have Dr. Graves as a mentor. He loved language, loved knowledge, loved books, and he was sincere in his love, unironic in his belief in the values of literature and philosophy and music. I asked him once whether he liked Mozart. He smiled and told me that Mozart was the Shakespeare of music. That was all, and that was all that was needed. He loved, admired, and respected brilliance, and he tried to teach us, even as freshmen, to love, admire, and respect brilliance, to learn from, rather than mock or fear those things we didn't understand, to be, altering one of his favorite quotations, fascinated, rather than fearful of what's difficult. I study at a different university now and have finally given into those poemo tendencies he used to gently tease me about. I teach composition as well, although I have yet to assign my students Henry James as, quote, grist for the mill, as he did, much less to assign a paper on Woody Allen Zelig without telling them first that it's a parody. In my life as a student and as a teacher, however, his memory is my touchstone. What he taught me, the swerve he created in my life, is that it is proper and good to always learn to read new things, new experiences. He taught me that to love books and ideas and teachings is to love life. And that, as in all things, he remains my teacher, mentor, and my friend. And then the final one here, from student Joel Repening. He said I mispronounced his name, I think I just did. Joel Repening. That's right, isn't it? He is another student. I think he was Dan's roommate when they were first here. And he studied under Dorset near the very end of, let's say, the second wind of retirement, or teaching, however you want to put it. Joel writes me that he started at CSE in the fall of 2004 as a pre-medicine RHOP scholarship participant. I think it's interesting that so many of these cases are people that didn't go on to do English necessarily, or didn't start out as English majors, but they had this really significant influence from this one teacher who touched them. After 2 years in the RHOP program, he switched to pharmacy with the intent of finishing a 4-year degree. Joel ended up getting a bachelor's in psychology from CSE with a minor in biology. He took a year off to work at Peterson Drug, where you may have encountered him, and then he was accepted in the PharmD program at South Dakota State University in Brookings in 2009, where he's currently working on his degree. He writes, quote, I've also focused pretty seriously on playing guitar since high school and throughout college. Actually, I remember Dr. Graves asking me once if I played a, quote, traditional guitar or an electronic guitar. I then realized this man has seen a lot of change. Joel plans to graduate in May of 2013 and hopes to work in a community pharmacy setting, possibly an outpatient clinic. And he and his wife, Kaylee, currently live in Hartford, South Dakota, where she's working on her business degree through the CSC program online. He titled his piece, this one's a little shorter, His Tiny Universe. I was a fledgling freshman with a full course load. As a health professions major, composition was the last thing on my mind. I had always thought of myself as an adept writer, and like most 18-year-olds, I had a comprehensive understanding of the universe. I certainly didn't need assistance with my writing. For our first assignment, an autobiography, I constructed a half-thought-out piece. Why would this require my full effort? I had chemistry, zoology, and calculus to study. However, the grade I received was markedly lower than I had hoped for, a B+. After receiving my graded draft, Dr. Graves approached me and said, Joel, I thoroughly enjoyed the expression, quote, a teeming pool of hormonal lust in your essay. Of course, he conveyed the phrase from memory. The more I got to know Dr. Graves, the more he did that. He imparted things from memory. Arcane passages from obscure books. Was there a novel he hadn't read? Was there a significant literary work that wasn't contained in his home, his personal classroom, in the basement of Rita King Library, or his storage facilities downtown, all of which were crowded to the brim with books? He generously gave me and my freshman roommate, Daniel Schweitzer, a hardcover Webster's Dictionary, which I will forever cherish. Dorset taught us the precedence of writing with a dictionary by our side. I had a pocket Webster's which had inscribed in large bubble letters on the side the word gross. Why? Our composition class, we were all well aware of the destructive nature of, quote, gross errors. Platitudes and mysterious grammatical glitches he extracted from one of the galaxies of his mind. The word gross was distinct, cutting, and appropriate. I won't forget it. I'll never forget the impact Dr. Graves has made on my life. It simply goes beyond words, in quotation marks. I wish mine would do him justice. Not only has he transformed the way I approach literature, he has permanently altered the way I view the world and my place in it. His boundless knowledge made the universe seem a little smaller. Thanks, Dr. Graves. Joel Repening, Composition 1, class of 2004. Isn't it nice? Okay, those are our testimonials. Thanks to those folks for sharing those testimonials. The plan is now to have people
Nathan, I
come.
know you have something to share.
We'll get everybody.
Alright, so this works. Alright, great. If you guys know me, I love to talk, just I'm really horrible at it, so I apologize. Tonight's going to be kind of a few secrets going to come out. First off, I did get your phone call. He told me to call him back as soon as possible. His phone number was 430, because his phone broke up, and I tried calling him. After the third person, I called the other wrong number. Is it ringing? Ring. Sorry. Anyways, after the third phone call, I finally gave up and tried to contact Sean. How I met Milton Wolfe was actually through a short story. This is another secret that I wrote 4 hours before the due date at 4 o'clock in the morning for Kathy Barr. So when I got the paper back, it was 15 pages long. I got it back, it said A+. I actually still have it. I was kind of surprised. I was like, all right, that's great. So, I believe I was the last official student. I put that in quotation marks because if you ever met Milton Wolfe, you were always a student. You couldn't talk to the guy without him imparting some knowledge on you. Whether you liked it or not, you're going to listen. Which I kind of gathered through my experience. So, when I apologize for the speech, I haven't really rehearsed as much, and my grammar is horrible, which is awesome standing in front of literary professors saying, so it's going to be a little interesting. So, when I was asked to recount some of my fond memories that I had with Milton, I fortunately had about a year's time with the man and some very unique experiences. But that was the way Milton was, a very unique, one-of-a-kind man. In the summer of 2011, I had the fortunate opportunity to do an independent study about science and fantasy fiction. I would normally say sci-fi, but as I was slapped on the wrist many times, science and sci-fi is to deal with science fiction movies, while science fiction is science fiction. There's many times where he glared at me across the table when I'd say, yeah, this is a great sci-fi novel, and then he just glared. I was told to speak to the director of the library by my advisor at the time, Kathy Barr. I wanted to be a fiction writer. In my later years, and the scenes you painted about Milton was a definite experience that would point me in the right way. The first day I met Milton, I had the thought of George Lucas. His hair was a mess, his beard and mustache combination, his persona screamed, I do science fiction. I was a little intimidated when I can put this on. Alright, there we go. I was a little intimidated when I first met him. When I asked him for the independent course, he said that he would take me under his wing on one condition. If I was willing to learn, and if I was willing to teach. He told me that he never took anyone unless he believed that mutual learning was to come of it. So my course had started. I was excited to learn from a man that had dedicated so much of his life to science fiction and fantasy. But at this day, I'm still wondering where I was supposed to teach him comes into play. The man wouldn't shut up. He would ask I'd get half the answer out, and he would start talking again. I was literally in his office for close to 2 hours at a time, and if I spoke for 10 minutes of that, I'd be surprised. Most of it was not even on the book that I was assigned. One time he told me how he refused to be fondled and groped by airport security. I can smell that government bull, there's little ears here, miles away, he proclaimed. This is why I chose to live out here. I can see it coming. They won't play with my parts, that is just the government trying to put you down. Just one of many of the topics we discussed for 2 hours. But I loved it. Every moment with the man that had devoted his and was still very passionate about and his interests. I listened to every word that he said, took it in, and learned from whatever he had to offer. The man made me read close to 500 pages a week and then write a 2-page response to what I had slammed into my eyeballs. Honestly, I don't remember sleeping that much for that summer when I was just awake trying to finish the next book so I would have something to talk about. For most of the time, when I did actually read the book, I would just actually listen to Milton ramble on about his thoughts about the science fiction novel. If you ever did science fiction or talked about science fiction, there was always some meaning. Dr. Everton said Michael Moore concept. There was a couple of times with like Moby Dick, he would go on a complete utter tangent. I would not understand where he was going with it, but I enjoyed listening to it. Eventually, we always came back to the government. He was, I don't know if I was a fan or against it, but either way, we always came back to it. But it was great to listen to him because of his speeches were a lecture. His speeches were not really a lecture. They're more nostalgic times and reminiscent. But one assignment that will stay in my mind, the rest of my mind, goes something like this. I was told to not read the assigned book for the next week, and just to come to the next week and you'd have the material. I was jumping for joy on the inside. I could sleep. I would jump for joy on the outside, but my body was so physically tired that I managed a weak little yay. So I came in on the day we had our lectures, walked into his office, sat down in his chair and to his left, and we began talking. The class felt like a drug deal. He looked at me and asked me to shut the door. So I did. I got up and closed the door and sat back down. He looked around for a moment and then reached into his desk, grabbed a manila envelope with bubble wrap and slid it across the table to me like it was contraband. I looked at him. He beamed a smile at me and waited for me to open it. I reached into the peculiar package, felt a familiar feel of the magazine, and lit the periodical from its case. I was looking at a July issue of Playboy magazine. I looked at it, back to Milton, and back and forth. I didn't know what to say. I just kind of looked at it, I just looked at him until he asked if I was okay with it. What was I supposed to say? I just said I was, but the reason escaped me and why I was holding this. He told me to turn to a specific page. The number doesn't matter. As I thumbed the pages, seeing articles, ads, and of course pictures, I reached my destination and opened the pages as I was expecting them to be stuck together. There it was, a science fiction short in the Playboy I was holding. It was obvious that I was to read this and write a paper on it, what I took from it. So, I took the parcel, wished them goodbye, and stepped out of the office. On the way out, I feel like I should have had an overcoat, dark shades, and a hat as I smuggled the smut out of the library. I had this nightmare that Sean would ask me what was in my hand as I walked out of Milton's office. Then the librarians on the way out. Then my mind painted this alarm system that they have at the front door. I was about to blur and announce to everyone that I was holding. I don't know why I was so nervous, but at the time it just felt a little weird. I read the article and did the paper and returned, and he asked me how it was. I wondered if he was talking about the article or the magazine in general. I simply answered it and said, good, and then that seemed to be satisfying enough. We discussed the stories of periodicals and that I should start submitting to random magazines. This was a lesson that I would never forget, because this is how many authors started, and Milton was introducing me to my very first steps. Milton was a great man, and one that will not be forgotten soon. His smile and his hello and his handshakes will always be ingrained in my mind. The man was the light of the world, and the world has gone a bit darker with his passing. But I will try to carry on his light, writing in his memory, and always thanking him for everything he's done for me. He taught me so much, and I hope they understood that. Milton was a great man, a great professor, and above all, a great friend. I hope I was able to teach him something, for I learned an enormous amount. And because of him, when someone ever asks, have you ever had a Playboy magazine? I'll proudly and honestly say, yes, but I only read it for the articles.
Just the volume if I knew where it was. Who's next? Come on up.
Thanks, Nate. That was great.
Good evening. My name is Anne Grenier, and I have the pleasure and honor of working at the library here on campus. I also live in Hot Springs, South Dakota, so I need to go home, feed my animals, go to sleep, turn around and come back and open the library. I also have a project right now, and I want to share with the Graves family that it is going through all of the books that you donated to us. And when I opened the door to the room where they're being stored, I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with all of these books? And I can only say that it is an honor to touch everyone and go through everyone, because they are a treasure, believe me. And that's the common thread, I think, that we see with these two great men, including yourself, Carl. They were great readers. They were great men, great women sitting here, family, professors. We all love to read. Some of you love to teach. And we're all here for students. We're all here to help them become better people. And I can't think of a greater honor and glory in this day and age. I'm going to miss Dr. Graves coming in and helping him. I love that so much. He and Milton and I, not always together, but individually, would talk about books. And it would sometimes only be for a minute or two at a time, because that was the trajectory on this path in life, that it was a good one. And I can only say that if there's one thing they probably would want you all to do, find yourself a great book, go home and read it. Travel, love passionately. I became a widow 2 years ago, too soon. And if I learned one thing, if you want to do something, do it. And these two men did that. So with that, I'm going home, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Who else? Come on up.
I'll walk here.
Okay.
Dorset absolutely loved this lecture series. Decades ago, when he was starting his academic career at Idaho State College, we enjoyed a similar mind-broadening series. There were small groups of people who sat before a massive stone fireplace in the campus library, and we treasured our time there so much because we got acquainted with the faculty and we learned a lot about their areas of expertise and their lives outside of the classroom. This lecture series is even better than the fine one we remembered because it showcases community speakers as well as CSC faculty and staff. And I can say that it has truly enriched our retirement years. I want to say a brief word to our 7-year-old Aspen. Grandpa loved the way you showered him with beautiful art and homemade cards. And he loved sitting with you and painting with you on so many occasions. I would like Milton Wolf's family to know that Dorset and I are among the many who admired him, honored him, and enjoyed his friendship. Milton's professionalism, his innovative leadership, and managerial style were simply superb. He created a beautiful campus living room, and he made the library even more of a warm and welcoming haven. Dorset's frequent library visits were enhanced by both Milton and Sean Hartman. They both were so thoughtful in easing his access to the library building as he aged. Beaming smiles and gracious hospitality from those excellent staffers meant so much to him and kept him better connected with the college that he loved.
We had another one in the back who wanted to say something. Oh, you want to go first, Mary?
I'm Mark Graves, Dorset Graves' son, and I'd like to start by thanking all of you here for your support and kind words, and also extend my family's condolences to Milton Wolf's relatives and family here today. I know my father had the utmost respect for Milton and shared love of books, and was extremely grateful for Milton allowing him to house a portion of his collection in the basement of the library for so many years. Thank you. I always thought I knew my father. I mean, he was dad. He couldn't punt a football or build a carburetor, and he certainly couldn't field dress a deer. But he had the innate ability to assimilate vast amounts of information. His preferred method was by reading books. He loved everything about books. He loved reading from them, learning from them, teaching from them, searching for them. And he also loved the tangible portions of books, holding them in his hands, turning the pages, just possessing them. I also knew he had his fear of flying stemmed from viewing Japanese kamikazes plunging into the ships surrounding him while he served in the Navy. I knew he also strived to be a gentleman at all times, standing when a woman entered the room or pulling out a chair. He was also a great movie buff, and many times when we'd be watching a movie, he would conjure up obscure facts about the film or its actors, and I would think to myself, why would you possibly know that? But that was just him. He was always a wealth of information. Other loves of his included his colleagues, teaching, bookstores, poetry, art, theater, classical music, show tunes, crisp bacon, warm maple syrup, learning about the world's religions, and of course his family. Dad didn't talk much about himself, but over the past week I've heard some interesting stories and found out some interesting facts. Con Marshall came to my mother's house and shared his article with the family, and there was information there that I had never heard of before. And I also discovered upon visiting the Veterans Office that my father had earned 4 medals while serving overseas during World War II. And the ship he was on transported part of the 7th Infantry Division during the initial attack on Okinawa. Facts my father never once mentioned. It saddens me that I didn't have more of a substantial conversations with my father. But it's heartening to know that he spent his life doing what he loved. Even to the end, he was surrounded by and enjoyed his lifelong friends. Just to name a few: Emily Dickinson, Walt Whitman, T.S. Eliot, James Joyce, Henry James, Wallace Stevens, Herman Melville, Charles Dickens, and of course his BFF, William Shakespeare. I came across a simple quote that kind of reminded me of my father. The more you read, the more things you'll know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go. Dr. Seuss. We'll miss you, man.
Ready? Okay.
My name is Beth Johnson, and I'm not a student at the library or an employee of the library. But I moved to Chadron about 2 years ago. And Milton was one of the first people that I met. And what a wonderful, welcoming committee he is. I thought of your words. Yes, he just, he reminded me a little maybe of Santa with all of his white hair and his love that he always exuded. He was a wonderful and caring and sharing person. And one of the things that will stay in my memory always is, as you've already heard, he was having serious health problems by May. And I had a little heart episode in April. And I'm walking through an aisle in Walmart and I hear him, boom, Beth, are you okay? And are you really okay? And he gave me a huge hug. And I said, but how are you doing? Oh, no. How are you? Are you really okay? And that was Milton. Almost immediately upon meeting him, I felt a kindred spirit because of his love of literature and history and the beauty of this area, which is in his photography here. And I thought that his establishing the Grace lecture series was a perfect example of his respect for his colleagues, as well as challenging the minds of all of the community to constantly continue to learn. He loved and supported this community totally. I always felt at home at the library, as I said, even though I wasn't a student. And I always felt at home at the lecture series. And I love the fact that it took my mind to places it hadn't been before and gave me new perspectives. And he believed that together this community could overcome anything. He planted thousands of trees with Carl to reforest after the previous fire. And he encouraged not only our youth, but our seniors to continue to grow and expand our minds. He believed in the future. He left a great legacy for nature and people and literature and learning. He encouraged everyone to love and appreciate and nurture all of the gifts of this earth. And one of the things that was said to me as I came in and looked at these wonderful photographs of his is that it's all burned now. But we still have what it once looked like in these photographs. And I know it will come back, because that is the wonderful thing about nature. And Milton would be the first one to say that. One thing that was said to me soon after I heard about Milton's death was, I hope his legacy won't be lost because of the way he died. And that's what made me weep. That someone would even think that, or that it could possibly happen, because I realized there could be some truth to that. So I would like to issue a challenge to everyone here and to this community. A challenge to honor Milton and Dorset's legacies. As somebody else said, I think it was Anne, read a book, write a book, share with one another. Keep a journal of just your everyday life and share it. Share it with your children. Share it with others. Teach someone to read so they can learn every day of their life. Go to the library. Support your library. Learn something new every day. Open your eyes and your mind to new ideas. Listen. Respect and nurture your community. Plant a tree, take a walk, thank a fireman. Do random acts of kindness. But don't let the legacy of these two men die. Let's keep it going and going and going. Thanks.
Okay, did you want to say a few words, Tiffany? And I think there were one or two more people who did want to speak.
This will be brief. Hello. I just feel compelled at this tribute and memorial service to request a moment of silence for the victims of 9/11, as well as the lives and careers that of Milton Wood and Dorset Graves. If we could please bow our heads and close our eyes in reflection. Thank you. As a loyal attendee of the lecture series, I believe and trust that the spirit of both those men will continue to be among us with the family and all the lives they've inspired.
Thank you, everybody. I know Milton will be very touched, very touched. Yeah, you bet. Just a minute.
I'd like to thank everyone. Unfortunately, we as Milton's family did not get to know him in the way that you all have gotten to see him. And I want to say that I know he would be so happy for the things that you all have said and shared. And it has certainly made us feel very honored that he had the opportunity to be with you and do and share. We did not know your father, your husband, and we give our condolences to you. But we are very, very honored that they got to share a lot to you and for everything that you did for him, because you'll never know. He did relate to us how he felt about this, and we did not get to share any of that with all of you and him.
Again, thank you. Like I said, the Graves Lecture Series were a very important part of Milton's life. He was so proud of what he had started. And I feel very privileged to have known Milton and been part of his life as a colleague and a dear, dear friend. I would like to tell you that the Graves Lecture Series, the legacy will continue. And our next speaker will be on the 18th. The lecture series are going to be week after week after week. Like I said, I scheduled these that way because I wanted Milton to be able to participate and attend. And the PR has already been out, so it's not going to be changed. Anyway, September 18th, we're going to have Dr. Sandy Schaefer. He's a faculty member in the music department. September 28th, Mary Jo Carnot is going to speak. She's our newly appointed Assistant Director of the Teaching and Learning Center. And then October 2nd is going to be a very, very special presentation, and that's Dr. Norma Neely. I don't know how many of you know, but Dr. Neely lost her home in the fire, so she's somewhat homeless. And being the kind and gentle person she is, she contacted me after Milton died to see how I was doing, and she had lost her home. I'll be grateful forever. I asked her how she was doing. Well, she said, well, a home can be replaced, but people cannot. So, Norma, thank you, and please know that our thoughts and prayers are with you and Roger. I hope to see you guys. It's great to have such a nice crowd, and thank you so much for being here.